Good afternoon, learners. My name is Atrey Sinha. I am Academic Officer English from National Institute of Open Schooling. Today we were here to read the lesson The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost, which is included in our Senior Secondary English course, Code 302 as lesson number 14. The central idea of the poem is about choosing different paths in life, both in reality and as a metaphor, with various possible interpretations. The poet in the poem The Road Not Taken is at crossroads, and there are two roads and he has to choose any one of them. So first let us read something about the poem. So number one, the name of the poet of this particular poem is Robert Frost, and it is a narrative poem, and it consists of 4 stanzas of 5 lines each. That means in this poem we can see that there are 4 stanzas and each stanza has 5 lines. And this poem, The Road Not Taken, was first published in the August 1915 issue of the Atlantic Monthly, and the first poem in the 1916 poetry collection named Mountain Interval is this particular poem. So this is all about the poem named The Road Not Taken, which is written by Robert Frost, and as we have already discussed that this is a narrative poem consisting 4 stanzas of 5 lines each, and this poem is first published in August 1915 issue of the Atlantic Monthly, and this poem is particularly the first poem of the Mountain Interval poetry collection, which was published in 1916. So if we try to understand the background of this story, background of this particular poem, we could see that there is a story behind writing this poem. And what was that? So Robert Frost spent the years 1912 to 1915 in England, and there among his acquaintance was the writer Edward Thomas. Thomas and Frost became close friends and took many works together. One day, as they were working together, they came across 2 roads. I mean a crossroad. From there they have to choose any one of the roads. Now Thomas was indecisive about which road to take, and in retrospect often lamented that they should have taken the other one. Now after Frost returned to New Hampshire in 1915, he sent Thomas an advance copy of The Road Not Taken, as he was a close friend of Robert Frost. Now Thomas took the poem seriously and personally, and it may have been significant in his decision to enlist in World War I. Now Thomas was killed 2 years later in the Battle of Arras. So this is the story behind writing this poem, The Road Not Taken. Now we will learn something about the poet itself, that is Robert Frost. Robert Frost won the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry 4 times, and it is a record that remains unmatched in the poetry category. So none of the poet has been awarded the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry 4 times. So Robert Frost is the only one. Now Frost was born in San Francisco in 1874, and he moved to New England at the age of 11, and there he became closely associated with the region. Robert Frost faced significant personal and professional struggles, including financial instability early in his career, and the deaths of several close family members was also something that disturbed him very much in her struggle period. Frost recited a poem at John F. Kennedy's inauguration in 1961, and becoming the first poet to do so. He was the first poet who has recited a poem at John F. Kennedy's inauguration in 1961. Before achieving fame as a poet, Robert Frost worked as a farmer in New Hampshire, and his connection to nature heavily influenced his poetry. And while often considered a New England poet due to his imagery and themes, Frost's work addresses universal human experiences and emotions, and his poetry transcends regional boundaries. Now we will move on to the poem, The Road Not Taken. Let's read the first stanza first. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both, and be one traveller long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. So you can see that there are 5 lines in this stanza. This is the whole first stanza you can see on the slide. Now this stanza, the first stanza is consisting 5 lines. I am repeating the lines again. The roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both, and be one traveller long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. So the opening line, the roads diverged in a yellow wood, it sets the scene and it introduces the central metaphor of the poem. The two roads diverged in a yellow wood. So the two roads symbolize choices in life. Not only the road, it doesn't mean only the road that is situated in the yellow wood. They have to decide which path they have to take. It is symbolizing the choices we have to make in our life decision. And the yellow wood, it represents a time of change or transition. It is often associated with autumn, as we can see in various pictures that in autumn season the leaves of the trees are quite yellowish in tone. So the yellow wood is maybe associated with autumn, and it represents a time of change or transition. And here the two roads symbolizes the choices in life, and maybe the choice in life, the road which we will take, could transcend our time. That is represented by the phrase yellow wood. Second line, and sorry I couldn't travel both. So the speaker expresses regret. This one more thing, the speaker itself is the poet himself. So the speaker or the poet expresses regret for not being able to explore both paths. It reflects the universal longing to experience all possibilities in life, and that is very true. We always wish that if we could explore all the paths that are catered in front of us, but unfortunately we have to select any one of them. So the poet also expresses the same regret for not being able to explore all the paths both the paths. And so as all the readers and all other human beings, all are longing to experience all possibilities in life but failed, in the same way Robert Frost also couldn't able to explore all the paths. Now moving on to the third line, and be one traveller long I stood. So the speaker pauses to contemplate the decision. They have to make a significant decision, so he pauses for a bit, and this pause emphasizes the difficulty of choosing a single path when faced with uncertainty. So you could realize that you could relate it with your own life. If there is there are various options in front of us, but if there is one single option which is very close to us, which we will always choose, we will readily accept that one. But if there is something, if the options, all the options are equally close to us, equally favorable for us, then we will take a pause. We could take a pause, we could wait a bit, and this time is for making a decision which one we should choose. So in this case, for the case of the poet also pauses to decide And this pause emphasizes, this pause reflects that the choice is not so easy, it is difficult. There is some difficulty of choosing a single path when faced with uncertainty, because he doesn't know that which would be the best one. So it took some time. Now, fourth line, and look down one as far as I could. Here the speaker tries to predict what lies ahead. It symbolizes our natural tendency to seek certainty before making any decision, to where it bent in the undergrowth. So the path disappears into the unknown, and it represents life's unpredictability and the limits of foresight. So this is the first stanza of the poem, The Road Not Taken. In this stanza, the speaker encounters two diverging paths in a forest, symbolizing a moment of decision in life, and the yellow wood suggests that it is autumn, a time of change, and the speaker feels regret for not being able to take both paths and spends time contemplating which one to choose. Now, looking as far as I could reflects the human tendency to seek certainty about future outcomes before making a decision. Now we will move on to the second stanza. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that, the passing there had warned them really about the same. So in the same way, just like the first stanza, in the second stanza too, the stanza consists of 5 lines. I repeat, then took the other one as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that, the passing there had warned them really about the same. So then took the other as just as fair. The speaker chooses the other path, suggesting it equally appealing, and this reflects the ambiguity and equality of many life choices. And having perhaps the better claim, the speaker rationalizes the choice, implying it might be better, and this shows how people often justify their decisions after making them. Because it was grassy and wanted wear. So the third line suggests that the path was less travelled, symbolizing the allure of individuality and taking a unique route in life. If we could see that there is a path, it could be happen in a rural area frequently, but if we could see in a rural area that if the road is quite grassy, then it could be understood that the path is less travelled. So if I choose that path, then it symbolizes that I am that kind of individual who tries to take unique route in life. So in the same way, the Robert Frost symbolizes here the alluring of individuality and taking a unique route in life. He is of the same coach. Though as for that, the passing there, the poet begins to reconsider, noting that both paths were equally worn, revealing the subjective nature of our perceptions. Had warned them really about the same. This confirms that the paths were equally travelled, highlighting the ambiguity of the choice and the illusion of significant difference. So in the second stanza, we find that the speaker chooses the second path, which seems equally appealing, just as fair, and initially it appears less travelled, and that's why quite grassy, and that symbolizes the allure of unique or unconventional choice. However, upon reflection, the speaker admits that both paths were actually worn about the same, and it highlights the similarity of many life choices despite how we perceive them. Now that's all about the second stanza. Now we will move on to the third stanza of the poem. And both that morning equally lay it leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. So the third stanza goes on like that, and both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. So the first line of the third stanza, and both that morning equally lay. So both paths appeared untouched, and emphasizes that choices often have no clear right or wrong answer at the moment of decision. In leaves no step had trodden black. The fresh leaves suggest a new beginning, and it reinforces the idea that every choice is a fresh start. Oh, I kept the first for another day. The speaker expresses hope to return and explore the other path as well, and it symbolizes our desire to revisit various opportunities we didn't take earlier. Yet knowing how way leads on to way, the speaker acknowledges here that one choice often leads to another, making it unlikely to return to the original crossroads. I doubted if I should ever come back. This realistic observation reflects how decisions often have permanent consequences. So in the third stanza, here the poet notices that both paths are covered in untrodden leaves, and it indicates that neither has been travelled recently. They express hope of returning to take the other path someday, but also acknowledge the reality that choices often set us on a path of no return. So this stanza, the third stanza, underscores the permanence and inevitability of life's decisions. Now moving on to the fourth stanza of the poem. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less travelled by, and that has made all the difference. So the fourth stanza goes like that. I shall be telling this with a sigh. The sigh could indicate that either satisfaction or regret, leaving the outcome of the choice ambiguous. Somewhere ages and ages hence, the speaker imagines reflecting on this decision in the distant future, suggesting its lasting significance. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I. The repetition reinforces the importance of the decision. It emphasizes the pivotal moment. I took the one less travelled by. So the speaker claims to have chosen the unconventional path, and it symbolizes the individuality or non-conformity, and that has made all the difference. And this closing line is deliberately ambiguous. The difference could be positive or negative, and it leaving the interpretation open to the reader, whether it is negative or whether it is positive. He doesn't explicitly say it so, what was the difference clearly. Now in the final stanza, the speaker imagines looking back on this choice in the distant future. The sigh could convey satisfaction or could convey regret, and it leaves the emotional impact of the choice ambiguous. And the speaker claims to have taken the less travelled path, and it suggests his individuality or non-conformity, but the true significance of the decision remains open to interpretation. Now that's all about the fourth stanza of the poem, The Road Not Taken. Now we will move on to the theme of the poem, and there are two dominant themes in this poem. First one is choices and uncertainty, and the second one is individualism and non-conformity. Now we will discuss these two themes one by one. First, in this poem, the speaker describes him or herself as facing a choice between which of two roads to take. The speaker's choice functions as an extreme metaphor for all the choices that the speaker and all people must make in life. And through the speaker's experience, the poem explores the nature of choices and what it means to be a person forced to choose, as all people inevitably are. Now, the poem begins with the speaker recounting the experience of facing the choice of which road to take, and the speaker's first emotion is sorrow, as he or she regrets the reality that makes it impossible to travel both roads or to experience both things. The poem makes clear that every choice involves the loss of opportunity, and that choices are painful because they must be made with incomplete information. Now, the speaker tries to gather as much information as possible by looking down one road as far as he could. But there is a limit to what the speaker can see, as the road is bent, and it means that the road curves, leaving the rest of it out of sight. So, the speaker couldn't see what was there after the road bends. So, the speaker, like anyone faced with a choice, must make a choice, but can't know enough to be sure which choice is the right one. Now, the speaker as a result is paralyzed. Long I stood, contemplating which road to choose, which one is to select. Now, the speaker does eventually choose a road based on which one appears to have been less travelled, but the poem shows as well that making that choice doesn't actually solve the speaker's problem. Immediately after choosing a road, the speaker admits that the two roads were owned really about the same, and that both roads equally lay without any leaves trodden back by passerby. So, the speaker has tried to choose the road that seemed less travelled, but couldn't tell which road was actually less travelled. By making a choice, the speaker will now never get the chance to experience the other road and can never know which was less travelled. The speaker hides from this psychic pain by announcing that he or she is just saving the first road for another day, but again reality sets in. And what was that? I doubted if I should ever come back. Every choice may be a beginning, but it is also an ending, and having to choose cuts off knowledge of the alternate choice such that the person choosing will never know if they made the right choice. The poem ends with the speaker imagining the far future when he or she thinks back to the choice and believes that it made all the difference. But the rest of the poem has shown that the speaker doesn't and can never know what it would have been like to travel down that other road, and can't even know if the road taken was indeed the one less travelled, which he wished earlier. And further, the final line is a subtle reminder that the only thing one can know about the choices one makes in life is that they make all the difference. But how or from what, neither the poem nor life provide any answer. So, in the poem The Road Not Taken, the speaker is faced with a choice between two roads and elects to travel by the one that appears to be slightly less owned. And the diverging roads may be read as being an extended metaphor for two kinds of life choices in general, the conventional versus the unconventional. By choosing the less travelled path over the well travelled path, the speaker suggests that he or she values individualism over conformity. And the speaker, when deciding which road to take, notes that the second is just as fair as the first, but that it has perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear. In other words, the second road had the added benefit of being less well worn than the first. Notably, this absence of signs of travel is phrased positively rather than negatively. Rather than stating outright that the road looked as if it had not had many travelers, the speaker states that it was grassy, a consequence of low foot traffic, and that it wanted wear, as if it were almost asking for the speaker to walk on it. And the speaker presents nonconformity as a positive trait and even implies that popularity can make things less appealing. The first road, because of its popularity, lacks the grass that makes the second path so enticing, right? So, despite the speaker's preference for nonconformity, though the poet ultimately remains ambiguous about whether choosing the road less travelled necessarily leads to a better or more interesting life. First, the poem questions whether it's actually even possible to identify what is nonconformist. After choosing the road that seems to have been less travelled, the speaker then comments that in fact the two roads have been worn really about the same. So, the speaker seems to sense that though he or she has attempted to take the road less travelled, there is no actually way to know if it was less travelled or not. Second, the poem subtly questions its own final line, in which the speaker asserts that choosing the road he or she did actually take has made all the difference. Many readers interpret this final line as being an affirmation of the speaker's decision to venture off the beaten path, but note that the poem is careful not to state that choosing the road less travelled has necessarily made a positive difference. Further, because the poem has raised the possibility that the path the speaker took was not in fact less travelled, it also raises the possibility that the speaker is wrong and taking that particular path can't be said to have made any specific difference at all. So, there is also a third option offered by the poem, which is that the speaker is correct that choosing that road made all the difference, but that is this difference was created not by taking the objectively less travelled path, because no one can measure precisely which path was less travelled, but rather by making the choice to try to take the less travelled path. In this regarding, the poem implies that it is the effort made to take the less conventional path that makes the difference. All right. Now, we will move on to the literary devices that the poet Robert Frost has employed in this poem, but before that we will take a short break.
कभी आपने सोचा है कि आप वर्ष भर पढ़ाई करते हैं, कक्षा में होने वाले प्रत्येक मासिक या त्रैमासिक टेस्ट को सहजता से उत्तीर्ण भी कर लेते हैं, लेकिन ऐसा क्या होता है कि जब परीक्षाएं आती हैं तो हम कुछ परेशान से हो जाते हैं, कुछ घबराने सा लगते हैं। क्या परीक्षा के इस भय से हम स्वयं को मुक्त कर सकते हैं? क्या इसके लिए कोई विधि, कोई मार्गदर्शक है? जीवन अनंत संभावनाओं से भरा है, इसीलिए परीक्षाओं से घबराने की आवश्यकता बिल्कुल भी नहीं है। परीक्षा एक निरंतर चलने वाली प्रक्रिया है। इनके चलते आप अपने जीवन को क्षति न पहुंचाएं, धैर्य से काम लें। जब हम हंसते मुस्कुराते हैं तो अपने आप हम सहज और तनाव मुक्त हो जाते हैं। इसीलिए परीक्षा के समय हमेशा प्रसन्न चित्त रहिए, चिंता छोड़िए और चुनौतियों से लड़िए। समय सारणी बनाकर नियोजित रूप से परीक्षा की तैयारी करिए। समय का प्रबंधन और सदुपयोग करना सीखिए। तनाव मुक्त हो जब हम परीक्षा में स्वयं से ही अनुस्पर्धा करते हैं, तब हम निश्चित ही बेहतर कर पाते हैं। इसी बेहतर को करने में NIOS की परीक्षा प्रणाली शिक्षार्थी का सतत सहयोग करती है। समय प्रबंधन के लिए शिक्षार्थी पूर्ण रूप से स्वतंत्र रहता है। वर्ष में 2 बार होने वाली मुख्य परीक्षाएं इसमें बहुत सहयोग करती हैं। इसके अतिरिक्त कभी भी परीक्षा देने की सुविधा शिक्षार्थी को बारंबार उनके समयानुसार परीक्षा देने के अवसरों को बढ़ा देती है। परीक्षा की तैयारी पूरी होने पर ही NIOS का शिक्षार्थी परीक्षा देता है। अर्जित अंकों का ट्रांसफर ऑफ क्रेडिट, 5 वर्षों में 9 बार परीक्षा के अवसर, दिव्यांग शिक्षार्थियों को अतिरिक्त समय व सह लेखक की सुविधा, मूल्यांकन में गोपनीयता के लिए बारकोड व OMR का उपयोग, क्षेत्रीय भाषाओं में उत्तर लिखने की स्वतंत्रता देशव्यापी शिक्षार्थियों को NIOS द्वारा दी जा रही है। माननीय प्रधानमंत्री श्री नरेंद्र मोदी जी की अनुपम कृति एग्जाम वॉरियर्स निश्चित ही प्रेरणा बोध से भरी है। आप भय मुक्त होकर पढ़ाई करते रहें। लगातार अध्ययन से आप अवश्य अपने स्वर्णिम भविष्य का निर्माण कर पाएंगे।
Welcome back, learners. We were reading The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost, which was included as lesson number 14 of our senior secondary English course, code 302. We were reading the literary devices of that were there in this poem by Robert Frost. So, the literary devices that Robert Frost has employed in this poem, The Road Not Taken, are metaphor, imagery, personification, alliteration and symbolism as well. We will now discuss all the literary devices one by one. First, metaphor. The roads symbolize life choices and decision. So, this is an example of metaphor where two things are compared, but the ground of comparison was not clearly stated. This type of literary devices we call metaphor. So, here the road is the metaphor that symbolizes life choices and decision. Now, the imagery. Imagery, here the descriptions like yellow wood and grassy and vented ware create vivid mental pictures. So, these are the examples of imagery. Now, the third one is personification. The roads are given human qualities, as in it was grassy and wanted word. So, there is personification as well. Now, symbolism. The diverging roads represent life's choices and their consequences. So, this is also symbol of life decision. Roads are always symbols of life decision, I mean for the most of the time. Now, there is also alliteration in this poem. How? There is repeated consonant sound of W, such as in wanted were, repetition of F in fast for. So, in this poem there are metaphor, imagery, personification, symbolism, alliteration, all 5 are there. Now, the speaker walking through a forest whose leaves have turned yellow in autumn comes to a fork in the road, and the speaker, regretting that he or she is unable to travel by both roads, since he or she is after all just one person, and that person stands at the fork in the road for a long time, and it tries to see where one of the paths leads. However, the speaker can't see very far because the forest is dense and the road is not straight, it curves. Now, the speaker takes the other path, judging it to be just as good a choice at the first. and supposing that it may even be the better option of the two, since it is grassy and looks less worn than the other path. Though now that the speaker has actually walked on the second road, he thinks that in reality the two roads must have been more or less equally worn. And reinforcing this statement, the speaker recalls that both roads were covered in leaves and which had not yet been turned black by foot traffic. The speaker exclaims that he or she is in fact just saving the first road and will travel it at a later date, but then immediately contradicts himself with the acknowledgement that in life one road tends to lead onward to another. So, it is therefore unlikely that he or she will ever come back to the original place, to the crossroad, to take the another path. The speaker imagines himself in the distant future recounting with a sigh the story of making the choice of which road to take, and speaking as though looking back on his or her life from the future. The speaker states that he or she was faced with a choice between two roads and chose to take the road that was less travelled, and the consequences of that decision have made all the difference in his life. So, the poem, we could quickly recall whatever we have read in this poem. So, the first stanza, the two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveller. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. So, in the first stanza, we have seen that the two roads diverge in a yellow wood. The opening line sets the tone of the poem, and it introduces a yellow wood where the poet have to take some choices. It could be in that particular yellow wood, or it could be in his own life decision. It could be related to his own life decision, where he has to select any one of the decision. So, the opening line sets the scene and introduces the metaphor of two roads, and as well as the yellow roads, the yellow wood, which represents a time of change. Then the speaker expresses the regret for not being able to explore all the paths in life, and this is similar of the universal longing to experience all the possibilities in life. Then the speaker pauses to contemplate the decision, and it emphasizes the difficulty of choosing a single path when faced with uncertainty. Then the speaker tries to predict what lies ahead, and it symbolizes human beings' natural tendency to seek certainty before making any decision. Then the path disappears into the unknown, and it represents life's unpredictability and the limits of foresight. So, in the first stanza, the speaker encounters two diverging paths in a forest, and it symbolizes a moment of decision in life, and the yellow wood suggests that it is autumn time, a time of change, and the poet feels regret for not being able to take all the paths, try all the decision, and spends time contemplating which one to choose. Looking as far as I could reflects the human tendency to seek certainty about future outcomes before making any decision. Now, moving on to the second stanza, here the poet says that then took the other as just as fair, and the speaker chooses the second path and suggests that it is equally appealing. This reflects the ambiguity and equality of many life choices. The second stanza goes like that: then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that the passing there had worn them really about the same. So, the speaker chooses the second road, and as it is equally appealing like the first one, and the poet then realizes the choice that it might be better. And this shows how people often justify their decision after making any one. And then the poet suggests that the path was less travelled, and it symbolizes the allure of individuality and taking a unique route in life. Then the speaker begins to reconsider and noting that both paths were equally worn and revealing the subjectivity nature of our perception, and this confirms that the paths were equally travelled. Now, in this second stanza, the reader could find that the poet chooses the second path, which seems equally appealing just as the other one, and initially it appears less travelled and grassy, symbolizing the allure of uniqueness or unconventional in choice. However, upon reflection, the speaker admits that both paths were actually worn about the same, and it highlights the similarity of many life choices despite how we perceive them. Now, in the third stanza, we can see that, and both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. So, in the third stanza here, the poet notices that both paths are covered in untrodden leaves, indicating that neither has been travelled recently, and they express hope of returning to take the other path someday, but immediately acknowledge the reality. And what was that? That the choices often set us on a path of no return. So, this particular stanza underscores the permanence and inevitability of life's decision. Now, moving on to the last stanza, it goes like that. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere edges and edges hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less travelled by, and that has made all the difference. So, in this final stanza, the speaker imagines looking back on this choice in the distant future. The sigh could convey satisfaction or regret, leaving the emotional impact of the choice ambiguous. The speaker claims to have taken the less travelled path, suggesting individuality or non-conformity, but the true significance of the decision remains open to interpretation. Then we have read the theme of the poem, that are choices and uncertainty, individualism and non-conformity. That was all about the poem The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. We will come back with another lesson on our next day. Thank you.